Hello and welcome to today's GlobalSign webinar. Today we're going to be discussing PKI automation for mixed endpoints. I'm Dan Farrell with the GlobalSign marketing team and wanted to thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our presenter for today, Sid Desai. Sid is the Director of Sales Engineering and is responsible for leading a team of engineers that help our customers implement advanced managed PKI solutions. We welcome your interactions with us, and while the phones are on mute, we do encourage questions. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you could submit them using the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll try to keep track and answer them all at the end of the webinar. And we'll also be recording today's presentation, and we'll send a link to the recorded webinar in a follow-up email. So just be on the lookout for that. And let's hand it over to Sid.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you all for joining today. I really do appreciate you guys being here on a Tuesday morning. So what you'll learn today here is pretty much everything you need to know about how to best manage and automate your company's PKI system. Now, given the time slot that we're in early morning, we may not be able to cover every possible scenario, but my goal today is to definitely get you thinking about your PKI projects and initiatives. I really want you to see how you can have a more robust PKI within your enterprise. So if I'm unable to answer all your questions today, please do contact us after this presentation, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Now, I'm assuming that most of you, if not all, are part of some IT team within your company. You guys probably know a lot about PKI. Some of you may even be the coveted enterprise or domain admins for your company's Active Directory. But not all of you may be. So before we get going and start talking about some PKI stuff, let's talk about some hurdles. I just want to talk about how tried and tested PKI is before we get into the hurdles of PKI. So PKI has been around for many years. You know, the ecosystems that we're dealing with today are most certainly different than that of many years ago. But most of you have depended on PKI and the use of certificates and certificate technologies for securing your outer perimeters, for public-facing web servers. Perhaps you use PKI for document signing, some type of user or machine or device authentication. I think the issue is, in all of these use cases that I've described over here, the problem always was, and it still is, it's never consolidated. You get your certificates when you need them from multiple vendors often, and some of you may even be generating your own self-signed certificates on the fly using OpenSSL and other such technologies. And pretty much any application that you use today within the enterprise has a component of PKI embedded in it. A lot of companies are using applications without passwords these days and relying on the use of digital certificates for their PKI system to have a higher level of authentication and replace passwords. But there's been some recent issues. Your ecosystems are expanding, and I think you're all pretty much aware of this scenario. There are more and more devices that are now being added into the enterprise network, and as enterprise networks continue to expand and more endpoints are added onto these networks, how can your PKI system manage and survive in this new ecosystem? So maybe traditionally you've been okay with using and managing your own PKI system with a few local certificates, perhaps a few self-signed certificates for a few servers or devices or two. But what about the plethora of other devices that you have that are now part of your enterprise network? Think about mobile devices, tablets, printers, routers, wireless cameras. Most of these devices consume certificates in one way or the other. So let's look at some of these hurdles in a bit more detail. You see, most of the concerns about higher volume deployment and a mixed bag use cases really come down to certificate provisioning and management. Whenever we speak to customers and our clients, the number one question they have revolves around how do I provision the right certificate on the right device, and how do I really manage these certificates? So questions like, how do I get all the different devices in my ecosystem the right certificates? How do I get the correct identifier or identifying information onto these certificates possible with my ecosystems? one of the biggest concerns amongst IT folks and admins all over the place is, where do you get these certificates from? I think the step number one is, how do I get my certificates? And step two is, how do I use these certificates within my application? Well, the first thing is, they don't even know which endpoints actually consume these certificates. A lot of admins that I've talked to think of certificates in this very archaic fashion. They think certificates only go on web servers. Well, that's not true. Certificates can go on devices, tablets. They can be issued for users. They can be issued to machines like wireless cameras. There's a whole lot of applications out there. And I think the key thing is on the ongoing lifecycle management. How do you ensure that these certificates not just get provisioned successfully, but also managed correctly? So you want to renew your certificates when it's time for renewals. You want to be able to revoke your certificates when you want them to be revoked, in case an employee leaves the company, or maybe an old device is decommissioned from use within your corporate network. So there's a lot of kind of points to think about when it comes to your PKI systems. Well, the good thing is, fortunately, you already have some of the key pieces of existing technology that can help address these concerns. So when I do speak to companies and enterprises, I always look at them to look at their existing investments. And one of the first things I ask organizations is, how do you manage your ecosystem of users, computers and servers and machines within your network today? You probably guess most of you use Active Directory out there. In fact, 99% of the people that I've asked this question have mentioned that we use Active Directory to manage our users and machines. Well, so you already have a repository of users and computers and servers, the two biggest consumers, or I guess three biggest consumers of certificates within Active Directory. You probably have 1,000 users here and there, depending on the size of your company, a laptop or a computer each for each of these users. So 1,000 computers right there, and you probably have a few, internal IIS servers sprinkled out that are domain joined. You can add them to the list too. And how do you control access to these systems and devices? How do you ensure that which devices has access to, which certificates or permissions and so on? Well, you use group policy, which most users who use Active Directory definitely use group policies. And so these are applications that you already use and your enterprise already supports them. Maybe you're thinking, well, perhaps you're stressed about the idea of managing another end user application, if it is a PKI-based application. Well, you don't really need to worry about that because your Windows-based clients already support certificate lifecycle management that's built in natively within Windows. So you don't really need any additional software that goes onto these Windows computers for you to manage your certificates. So I guess what's the deal with Active Directory and PKI? Sure, there's some linkages there, but how they're really connected? Well, Active Directory has built-in certificate services, which most of you may be aware of, and which provides a number of benefits around certificate administration. For example, you can seamlessly register and provision certificates to all domain-joined objects based on group policies. That's pretty simple. You can perform auto-enrollment and silent installations. That makes the entire certificate deployment process very easy for IT administrators and end users. The end users have no idea that their laptops are now provisioned with certificates, so they like that. And your PKI system obviously supports a wide range of certificate templates and use cases. And all of this comes standard with the Microsoft Certificate Services platform. And obviously you use group policies to control which devices get which certificates. So I guess when it comes to deploying certificates to your Windows endpoints, you really have two possible choices. Sure, most of you are familiar with using an in-house CA, such as a Microsoft CA. If you're still using self-signed certificates or OpenSSL-based certificates, I highly recommend you move away from them. They're really difficult to manage. So start looking at other options that are available. So Microsoft CA is definitely one of the options that are available out there. But you can also go with a third-party CA, such as GlobalSign. Now, with your in-house CA, obviously you have your CA integrated with Active Directory, and you can manage your CA operations in-house. You can fire up a few servers, run them in tandem, have recovery and backup and all that good stuff within your enterprise. And on top of that, you may have a resource or two allocated to run and manage your PKI system. So managing anything in-house, as you may all be aware of, does require some resources and expertise that they can perform on a daily basis onto the managed CA. But when it comes to third-party CA, you pretty much have the same offerings. You know, a lot of times, in fact, most times, they do integrate with your Active Directory. The benefit here is they take the complexity of your CA operations out of your hands so that you can focus on your existing business. And the added benefit is that you don't really need anyone in-house to manage and run your own CA. And that's very powerful because you want to optimize your operations. You want to make IT better. You want to really focus on the business that your organization is in and not really worry about PKI, as an overload to manage your applications and so on. So we've talked about, obviously, some of the benefits of having a CA in-house, but deploying and managing your own in-house CA can be complicated. And not only does it require specialized skills, but also doing so securely requires that you have expensive hardware such as HSMs, which are hardware security modules that store your private keys and private key material. It does require specialized knowledge on segmenting operational practices from operational infrastructure. And in fact, if you ask any IT administrator today about their in-house or existing PKI system or existing processes, you'll probably get some very scary answers. There's a lot of things that you have to maintain and manage in-house. You have to ensure that your uptime is super high, and when it comes to in-house PKI systems, you obviously have to keep up with your PKI best practices, and that's not easy when you have to comply with a lot of these PKI rules and regulations that the CA browser forum sets for you. There's certain things that you can't do, and there's certain things you cannot do, and I think understanding these best practices is very important. And obviously, you want a secure operation. You don't really want anybody, from outside of your company to have access to your resources. So protecting your PKI system is very important. Now, not just that, there are some hidden costs to Microsoft CA. And this is actually a screenshot that we've taken from an Excel sheet that we often give out to our prospects or customers. It's a total cost of comparison. I think it's a TCO sheet that gives you a one-to-one comparison between running your own Microsoft CA in-house versus outsourcing it. And the benefit is you can punch in your own numbers because these numbers may not be the same throughout the globe. So if you want, we can send you this Excel sheet. You can punch in your own numbers, perform your own comparisons on what the cost factors would be. But I think the three main kind of expenses for running your own CA in-house, the first major one is the cost of the HSM. Now, hardware security modules, for those who have dealt with them in the past, are not cheap. $38,000 a piece, and if you want a lot more other services on top of that, there's an additional cost. You obviously have to have a dedicated server from running Microsoft CA. Oftentimes you want to run backups and stuff, so you need another server for that. The cost of certificates are free, sure. You're not really paying anything if you want to run and manage and maintain your own in-house CA, but you do need someone who has the expertise to maintain the certificates, the certificate templates, the HSMs, the server patches and updates and security, root distribution, and a whole bunch of stuff that comes with managing your CA system. So the total cost of ownership, TCO, right there for 5 years is around $483,000 just by looking at these figures. And like I said earlier, you can punch in your own numbers here, and it'll still give you a higher number. I can definitely tell you that. And on top of that, if you want to have a public trust, because 90% of the customers that use an in-house PKI, they push and provision certificates thinking they will be trusted externally. Well, that's not the case because your PKI system is local to your enterprise. The certificates that these PKI systems generate are not generally trusted for public trust. So if you do want to have that public trust, you have to be part of a trusted root program with a CA like us, and that adds a cost factor as well. You obviously have to comply with the audits that your company goes through, and there's a cost vector right there. And obviously, to secure all these pieces together, you need a secure infrastructure to be able to store and manage these HSMs in a secure fashion, and there's a cost vector right there. So the overall kind of cost goes up quite a bit when it comes to running and managing your own Microsoft CA. Well, the benefits for outsourcing your CA operations are really, we take away all this PKI management from you. So you don't really have to manage the roots or the intermediates or any CRL services or OCSP services on your end. A CA such as GlobalSign or any other CA can take care of all of that for you. So this kind of helps reduce the IT administration drastically because you don't really have any servers to manage. You don't really have any HSMs that you have to manage. So overall, it decreases the risk, that you take throughout the enterprise. And I think the benefit is, as a CA, we are all web trust audited. So if we do something wrong, we will be caught, and our business is dependent on the fact that people trust us, and we do a fairly good job at it. And I think it's important to understand that when you are looking at certificates that you want certified web trust, you can't really have your own PKI system out there. You need that public trust. So what are the additional benefits of hosting, going with the hosted CA route? Well, you can absolutely issue any kind of public certificates, and this is very ideal for use cases that involve SMIME. So a lot of companies want to digitally sign their emails or even encrypt them, and they want to be able to send these emails out to another organization and still want them trusted. You can definitely do that with our public SMIME certificates. You can issue private certificates if you want to. So just because we are a public CA doesn't mean that we only issue publicly routed certificates. We can absolutely create the private hierarchies that you're looking for and manage them for you, and you can still issue private certificates off of a public CA. You can also perform things like role delegation, reporting, and logging. So a lot of folks who may use Microsoft CA are probably familiar with the lack of reporting and logging functions that are available as part of Microsoft CA. Well, we are CA, so every single activity that we perform from a CA perspective is tracked. Right from the point of time where you order a certificate to when you revoke a certificate. The entire life cycle is tracked and managed onto our backend. So you do have a lot of that reporting options as well. And it's easy for managing external users. So you can log on to a web-based SaaS portal. You can log into the application, add external users as you want them, or give them access to certain pages where they can request a certificate that goes through an approval process. So there's a lot of different kind of processes that we have in place where you can make it easy for the end users to grab their certificates. So I guess to pivot a little bit, I've been talking a lot about Windows endpoints, and rightfully so. Active Directory, if you're using it, 90% of your devices are probably Windows. You probably have a few Linux or Mac machines lying around. But what about these, other flavors, right? You have Windows and Mac and Linux and network devices such as routers, or even mobile devices. Because as we talked about earlier, your ecosystem is not just Windows. It's a mix of all these different device types. And so how do you take care of these? Well, the benefit is our entire system is API based. And we support multiple protocols. So in this case, for those of you who are familiar with SCEP, the Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol, it's a protocol that's widely used to manage your Cisco devices. In fact, Cisco is the first company to come up with this protocol, and it's being used widely today to not just provision certificates and identities to network devices such as routers, but also in certain applications to mobile devices, because a lot of MDMs, mobile device management companies, also support the use of the SCEP protocol. Now, for those who might be familiar with Let's Encrypt, you may have heard of the ACME protocol. And this is fairly new. Let's Encrypt is the company that developed this protocol, and they use this to issue DV certificates, free DV certificates, in fact, to a lot of web portals out there. Well, yeah, we support that too. So this is just another protocol support that we've added onto our platform so that the users and admins, they don't just have one option to get their certificates. They can go through these multiple routes and still be able to grab all the certificates that they need for their different endpoints. And the best part is we have MDM connectors. So we often interact and integrate with technology partners and MDM companies out there. So two of the biggest MDM providers out there, AirWatch and Mobile Iron, we are fully integrated with them, both on their cloud and their on-prem product. So we do offer these connectors. We do have APIs in place. So if you have the expertise to write your own in-house code and you want to leverage our APIs for all of our products pretty much and be able to provision certs that way, you can definitely do that. So the options are a lot. If you want to provision certs to your non-domain join endpoints, you definitely have 3 or 4 different options. So I guess the question is, how many different solutions do I need? We talked about integrating with Active Directory. We talked about having a portal access. We talked about these different protocols. Well, the benefit is you don't really need that many. You just need one. AEG, the GlobalSign Auto Enrollment Gateway product, is essentially a connector that speaks multiple languages, so to speak. It talks to your Active Directory on one end. It's very well integrated with your Active Directory. And it speaks the SEP and SES protocols for those of you who are familiar with it. And as mentioned before, it talks to our GlobalSign cloud services platform using APIs. And every single transaction is over HTTPS, so there's no point of any information leaking out of the network. The AEG also speaks SCEP, as mentioned before. We talked about that. And we also do speak the ACME protocol. And that's a benefit because in certain cases, when you have devices such as your Linux servers or Nginx servers that you want to provision certificates on, you do have the traditional, upload your CSR method and be able to grab those certs. But ACME is a fairly new protocol. It's being used widely out there, and we do support that as well. And as mentioned before, we do support integrations with MDM. So using this single device, a single solution, you can now provision certificates to pretty much all your endpoints that we talked about in the earlier slides. So you don't really have to worry about using multiple vendors for different types of certificates, and forget about using self-signed certificates. When you use a solution like AEG, not only do you have the option to get your public certificates from us because we are a public CA, but you do also have the option to grab your private certs, and that's important for a lot of use cases. All right, so a quick kind of primer on what AEG is all about. AEG expands beyond what a Microsoft CA is. A lot of you may have used Microsoft CA in the past. The guts of AEG still depend on certain Microsoft CA features, such as the use of certificate templates. So if you do have existing certificate templates that you use with your Microsoft CA, you don't have to throw them out. You can still reuse the same templates, except in this case, you'll point these templates to talk to AEG as a CA versus your Microsoft CA. And you do have the option to issue from a dedicated private issuing CA that we host for you, or you do have the option to use one of our public CAs. The benefit of having a private CA is you can control and manage your hierarchy however you want. So if you're looking at a single tier hierarchy or maybe a multi-tier hierarchy, we can create all of this for you. We can manage it for you. We can host the CRL services and OCSP services and all of that for you. So there's a lot of benefit in doing that. And because our infrastructure is based on, is very highly available, and we use CDNs throughout the world to provision some of our services, the service offering is very fast. The overall time to issue certificates is very quick. And we manage the security and the high availability and your CA. We have data centers throughout the world, and we secure your CA into HSMs in a room that's heavily protected. We secure your CAs as we would our CAs. So there's no question that your entire infrastructure and your PKI issuances are highly secure. And the benefit is we can support a wide range of use cases. So I guess let's kind of switch into what type of use cases that we do support. The most obvious one is the SSL and TLS for web servers. So as mentioned before, we can support Windows devices, but we can also provision certs onto Linux devices or Linux-based servers. We can also perform user, machine, and device authentication, which is used quite a bit in the enterprise. We've been getting a lot of interest from companies who want to work on projects like 802.1x. They want to use certificates issued to users' computers to authenticate to a network. We can definitely do that. We can also do SMIME if you want to do private SMIME to keep it within your network or within your enterprise. We can do that. But if you want public trust, we can absolutely give you that public trust that you're looking for. You can perform, obviously, office document signing with that same SMIME certificate as well. And the final use cases that we do support is the SSL inspection and decryption. A lot of companies out there are now using these firewall devices, offered by companies such as ForcePoint and Zscaler and whatnot. And we can definitely perform the SSL inspection and decryption on these devices, obviously on a private hierarchy. And we can talk about these use cases in detail with you once you reach out to us. So I guess to kind of pivot towards the end of this slide deck, the benefit for really outsourcing your PKI and automating your PKI for your mixed environments are many. And doing so with a third-party trusted CA such as GlobalSign is increasingly beneficial just because of the powers that we can offer or we can give to your PKI system. We can help you cut costs for your PKI system ownership by as much as 50%. And as mentioned before, we do have that TCO comparison sheet. So if anybody who wants that sheet, definitely email us. We can send that out. You can punch in your numbers, look at the cost yourself. And the benefit is you can have a very mixed environments and still be able to use a same CA that's robust and can issue certificates not just to your Windows endpoints and servers, but also to Linux devices, network devices such as routers, as well as mobile devices. And finally, to end it, we do obviously have both private and public hierarchies. So whatever be your use case, you don't have to have multiple instances of AEG running. You can still use the same instance to issue public as well as private certificates. And we support a wide range of other use cases as well. So to end with, I do highly recommend contacting us if you want further details about AEG or any of our other product offerings. I do want to thank you for taking the time on a Tuesday to listen in. And if you do have any questions, definitely reach out to me. And now I guess I'll pass it back to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Sid. So we're going to take this time to answer any questions that you guys may have. So go ahead and post those in the questions portion of your GoToWebinar control panel. So we did get some questions over the presentation. So we'll start with this one. We have a question. Can I issue both public and private certs from the same appliance?
Yes, well, to answer your question, yes, you can definitely issue the same public and private certs from the same software. AEG is not delivered as an appliance. We're not following the appliance model. It's a piece of software that sits on a Windows Server 2012 R2 machine, and it talks to your Active Directory on one end, so it has to be domain joined, and it talks to our APIs on the other. It is not an appliance, but yes, we can definitely do both public as well as private hierarchies with this.
All right, great. That sort of answers another one of the questions that we got that basically asks, is AEG a physical server that we would need to have in our data center? So
Yes. So to kind of add to that, Dan, yeah, you can definitely have it on a physical server. You can have the software running on it. But a lot of our customers even have VMs, virtual machines, that they run AEG on. The software itself is not resource heavy, so it doesn't consume a lot of resources on your end. So you do have the option to have it running on a virtual appliance as well, virtual server as well, not appliance.
All right. Um, we have a question of how can we evaluate your AEG product?
Well, there are many options. Definitely reach out to us after this call. Most of our customers that do want to learn more about AEG and our solutions go through a proof of concept. So what we can do is we can create a test account for you on our systems, give you access to a demo hierarchy that is obviously a shared hierarchy that a lot of our customers use. But because it's for demo purposes, it's not really something that you have to worry about. And once you're happy, once you test everything and all the possible use cases that you may have, you can definitely come back to us again, and we can create your own company-specific private hierarchy for you that then you can use. And these are valid. These CA certificates that we create for our companies and customers are valid for 20 years. So you know for a fact that we'll definitely be supporting it until then.
All right. Yeah, we're still getting some more questions coming in, so keep going with that. We have a question. Does AEG provide capabilities to renew SSL or SMIME certificates, renewal, deployment on endpoints, and lifecycle?
Yes. So we can definitely support all of those, especially SSL and SMIME. These two are one of our two kind of hot use cases that we use. A lot of companies, they only need public certificates, and if they have a huge number of Windows server endpoints and users that need public trust, we can definitely use AEG to provision these public certs and still be able to manage the lifecycle. Because at the end of the day, as soon as cert is about to expire, it automatically sends another request to AEG, and the device or the user, in this case, can grab their cert automatically through auto-enrollment.
All right. Our next question, is your product able to manage non-GlobalSign certificates? And they're asking because they have a few others in the enterprise.
So what we do offer is we partner with a company, a third-party company, and we have a tool called the Certificate Inventory Tool. And what this tool will let you do is it will let you scan your environment to kind of get a snapshot of how many different types of certificates you have. And it primarily scans for SSL certificates using the port number 443, but also you can punch in other port numbers as well. And once you discover all these different certificate types, you can then come to us and order certificates for those endpoints through our portal. We do not support a direct ability to manage certificates for other vendors through our platform. But if a certificate was issued by us, you do have the option to manage the entire lifecycle of that cert through us.
All right. All right, we're going to do like two or three more questions. So how do you manage key recovery for SMIME encryption certificates? Is it automated, for example, to recover the keys on another device or machine?
That's a good question. So if you are using AEG, you do have the option to automatically archive the keys on the AEG server. Now, from that point on, you can move these keys around to whatever secure location that you may have. But this is a location that you can switch. If you don't want AEG to kind of have your private keys available on the server, you can change that location. I forgot to mention kind of one point during the entire presentation. We as a CA, we have no exposure into your private key material. So any private key material that's generated on premise on your device, we have no exposure into that private key material on our CA platform, on our cloud platform. So the private keys never leave your environment, unless obviously in cases such as key archival and recovery, they leave the device and they go up to AEG, which is still part of your environment, but they never reach to our cloud services on the back end. So yeah, you do have the option to enable key archival at the template level, and as soon as the users start seeing certificates, their keys are automatically archived.
All right, great. Yeah, so one of our last couple questions says, do you use ACME the same way that Let's Encrypt does?
Pretty much, yes. So Let's Encrypt actually uses ACME to issue DV SSL certificates. These are domain validated, and these are the only type of certificates that Let's Encrypt can issue today. What we offer is also the ability for companies to issue an enhanced level of SSL certificate, which is OV, which is organization validated, and then also EV, which is extended validated. You may have seen EV certificates when you go on websites and you see the green bar. Those are definitely EV certificates. So yeah, we can definitely use ACME to the ACME protocol to issue not just DV SSL certificates, but also EV and OV.
Okay. And the final question, it says, can you issue certs to my Palo Alto firewalls?
That's a very good question. Yes, we have worked on recent projects in the U.S. where a couple of companies that we worked with did use the Palo Alto firewall devices, and we were able to create a private CA hierarchy for them. And through that hierarchy, they were able to issue a subordinate CA certificate to their Palo Alto devices. In fact, we have a couple of other customers that are talking to us that are using other firewall appliances such as ForcePoint and Zscaler, and so we'll be supporting these types of devices as well. But yeah, if you do have any questions about these firewall certificates or subordinate CA certificates, definitely reach out to us because that's definitely a hot topic these days. We've been getting a lot of requests from companies to be able to support their use cases surrounding SSL inspection.
All right. So I know we did get some other questions, but we're running out of time here. So if we did not get to you, we're definitely going to be in contact with you. So keep a lookout on your email. So yeah, thank you for attending the webinar, and I hope you guys all have a great day. Thank you very much, Sid.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody.